Hi everyone, and welcome to Terf Talk Downunder. I'm Angie, and with me today I have Isla and Lynn. And Isla and Lynn are both from Tasmania, where there has been a lot happening this week. We'll go through that in a few minutes, but first we'll do a quick news rundown because there's a lot of other stuff happening. The big news is the Scottish First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has resigned on the back of her abysmal dealing with the self-ID bill that they tried to shove through in Scotland. And she's saying, oh, no, it had nothing to do with that, but it was so obvious that, you know, women in Scotland and around the world weren't having a bar of self-ID. And this is an example of what happens when the public knows what's going on. Because here in Australia, these self-ID bills are pushed through via stealth, and the same in New Zealand and places like that. They're sort of pushed in and the public isn't fully aware. And in Scotland, they were fully aware and they rejected it outright. The vast majority of people said, we don't want male rapists in women's prisons. So, you know, there's a lesson for Albo and anyone else who thinks, you know, that the general public is on board with gender ideology. You know, we're not anti-trans. Dress however you please, you know, call yourself a woman or whatever if you must, but stay out of our spaces. You know, so that, I think that is a massive win for, you know, common sense, basically. We'll see who replaces her, but yeah, it's very good news. And it's also people like Fentiman in Queensland. She should be put on notice too, because they're trying to shove self-ID through in Queensland. They're also, if Labor get in New South Wales, they're going to try and shove it through the back door there. And, you know, these people should see what happened in Scotland and realise that, you know, when the public finds out, they're going to have to repeal it. They may as well not put it through, you know. Yeah, and other news. The Australian Law Reform Lobby Group is lobbying for religious and private schools to have to do gender ideology as well. Now, they currently have an exemption. So, yeah, so they're going to try and force these schools to teach the imaginary gender ideology. And I think the great hope for that is that, you know, some of these religious organisations are quite wealthy and they may have the means to challenge this in court, because that's what we need. All this legislation just gets shoved through and we need legal fightbacks, you know, like the Roxy Tickle Sal Grover case, which is actually having its first hearing to see whether it goes right up to the High Court this Friday, so tomorrow, which is a big deal. Yeah, so that case is going ahead at this point. And, you know, best of luck to Sal Grover. Yeah, well, this is the first opportunity we've had in Australia to challenge the conflict between gender identity and sex in law. So this is a huge thing for all of us. So, yeah, good luck, Sal. Also this week, Kit Kowalski has dredged up some videos of ACON staff members talking about how they indoctrinate people, and some of their attitudes towards women and same-sex attracted people are absolutely appalling. So if you want to have a look at those, go to Kit's website and ACON Exposed, which is, yeah, a website with all the ACON stuff. But Lady Kit Kowalski also has some of that stuff, or follow Kit on Twitter. Yeah, and then the other little bit of news is not really news, but the Australian media has been saying some really defamatory things about J.K. Rowling in light of her video game Hogwarts Legacy being released. And they're saying all sorts of things about how she's a transphobe and how she's, you know, anti-trans and just saying horrible things about her and implying that she's really nasty. And also, you know, also that she's doing a podcast to kind of explain her side of all the recent events where she's sort of gone from being, you know, the UK's darling to their worst enemy. And she's going to be doing that. But yeah, the media has been promoting both of these things in a way that's, you know, really horrible, similar to the way they speak about anyone who has gender critical views. So, you know, that's something to watch, because I'm sure if somehow J.K. Rowling hears about the way the Aussie media are describing her, as a warning to all of us, you know, that you can't be a transphobe, otherwise you're a horrible person. I hope JK's lawyers get to hear it and, you know, chuck a couple of writs at Channel 7 and 9 for defamation. That would be wonderful. Right. So that's just an overview of the news. The big news have been the protests in Tasmania, and the tide seems to be turning regarding some of the journalism reporting on these protests. And also a member of the Hobart City Council has thrown her support behind some of the things that we find problematic. So for that stuff, because you are the person on the ground actually protesting, Lynn, do you want to tell us what's been happening?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'll just give a quick overview. I have only been at 2 of them, not the first one, but that one was at the Hobart swimming pool up on the Domain. There was a protest that a number of people attended, and it was because there were posters that were saying basically that anyone could go into the women's change rooms if they identified as a woman. I don't know if they used those words, but that's pretty much what they were saying, and that everybody just had to put up with it, really. So there were some women who protested that, and some men. And there was really bad coverage in the media, except for one journalist, Ben Cedar, who gave a fair and impartial coverage of that event. Louise Elliott, who is a Hobart City councillor, she attended the event just to find out what it was all about. And having done so and got up to speed with all the issues, went on to social media and sort of let it be known that she was, you know, taking interest and was listening, and got a bit of flack on social media. Then we had The Advocate, which is up here in Burnie, did an editorial on the Hobart event, telling pretty much all of us that don't agree that grown men should be allowed into the change rooms with little girls, that we're all bigots. But what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Isla McGregor, because she's going to read out the editorial so that you can actually hear how bad it really was.
The editorial, I should say, appeared in The Advocate on the very same day that the report by Ben Cedar was published, the very good professional report by Ben Cedar. So the editorial was headed, Trans, Gender Diverse, Face, Fear, Ignorance. Not quite 26 years ago, Tasmania overturned, after a long struggle, a shameful law that prosecuted gay men. There have been more reforms, more changes that followed, at times ugly debates, but which helped deliver a more accepting, more tolerant community. A little more than 5 years ago, Tasmanians voted above the national average for marriage equality, another step forward that was evidence too of how far we've come. Yet it is not right to believe we have reached some happy place where bigotry and discrimination no longer exist. On Friday, a group, admittedly and thankfully rather small, protested outside Hobart's Aquatic Centre. They claim to be standing up for the privacy and dignity of women and girls. I should mention we put out a media release for the protest and got no phone calls from media about that at all, except from Ben Cedar. In reality, they are targeting what remains as the most marginalised group within our society, trans and gender diverse people. Those advances we have seen in rights for and acceptance of gay people has perhaps assisted in paving the way for others to come out of the shadows. But there's been pushback, and not only from those who would have been just as likely to speak against decriminalising homosexuality, back in the 90s. Activists claiming to be focused on protecting women are attacking trans women in particular with fear and ignorance. They are old weapons used before by those opposed to social change and often driven by anecdotes held up as examples of the supposed dangers. There is an inference in this case that creepy men are masquerading as trans women so as to be close to girls and women when they are getting changed. It is as offensive towards trans and gender diverse people as it is lacking in evidence. It might happen or have happened somewhere, sometime, in some circumstances, does not make for a good basis to discriminate against people, to exclude them, to invade their privacy. The sign said to be displayed in the Aquatic Centre change room says it best. We all need somewhere to go. If we accept each other's differences and respect each other's privacy, then everyone can feel safe here. What an inclusive society we would have if this was the standard we all lived by. The editor is Anthony Hanavier. He's a former government media officer with the Liberal government. He received 3 complaints about his reportage, his editorial. One of those complaints included a statement about how his reporter had in fact reported fairly and impartially on the facts of the issue. He rejected all our requests for a meeting to discuss our complaints and gave us a very curt response saying there would be no point whatsoever in meeting with us, which very much, is the sort of response we've had from Labor leader here, Rebecca White, various other legislative councillors and aldermen. No point whatsoever in meeting with us. So, as likely you will understand, there will be a complaint to the Press Council on this matter. Good.
Yeah, and if any of our viewers want to complain too, just got the details. I'll put them in the underneath if I can access it. Yeah. Cool.
Right. And so, as Isla said, that we'd sent in complaints, I actually spent quite a lot of time sending in an extensive reply to that editorial, providing all the reasons that he's wrong, and all the evidence, basically. And yeah, we just got told that he didn't want to talk to us. So he's got the evidence. It's actually been provided to him. But as far as we know, well, so far there hasn't. And we also sent in a response to that editorial. Yep. And that hasn't been printed as well. Has it, Isla?
No, it hasn't been published, no. But no. It was published on the Women's Action Alliance Canberra blog as part of their blog article on the whole issue.
Excellent. Honestly, like, even I used to work at a local paper down in Gippsland, and even back in the day, like back in the 90s, early 90s, if an editor was accused of that kind of bias, they were obliged to give a response. Not anymore. People can write the biggest amount of bollocks and there's no accountability. It just doesn't make sense. The only people they care about are the people paying for their advertising. And we all know that, that's people with the vested interests and with the means. They don't give a rat's about Joe Public.
No.
Or Joanne Public.
Joanne Public, yes.
So, yeah, and there was another event outside the office.
There was. So because we were absolutely astonished, probably more than anything, that having had a number of people reply to him in length, providing the reasons why women and girls need to have their single-sex spaces, which, of course, there's multitudes of reasons, and also other evidence showing that, there have been cases all around the world where women have been either filmed or attacked or whatever. All of it was just totally ignored. So, yes, we did another action where we basically stood outside the Advocate office with a banner asking for his resignation.
I shared a picture of that on Twitter and it got hundreds of likes and went all around the world.
Excellent.
Everyone's really proud of you for that. Fantastic.
Yeah. So, but we still haven't heard from him, and he hasn't, asked for any information that he could put in the paper to in response to his editorial. So,
what a snake. Oh.
So that happened. And then I think the next thing that happened was that Louise Elliott, who had obviously listened to women at the protest earlier, put forward a motion with the Hobart City Council that all, I suppose you could say, local government, or at least Hobart City Council public spaces that require a single sex, i.e. female, male, and then an all gender space for all those who don't wish to go into the space of their birth sex. And all hell's broken loose. Who would have thought that asking for something that's just got so much common sense behind it would bring out all these people who just think that it's bigoted to expect everyone to be safe, females, males, and the people who are identifying as transgender or non-binary. It's quite amazing.
Have you noticed that the people that are most vocal about it are just males that aren't trans-identifying?
Yes, and in the case of Hobart City Council, a female councillor who seems to have got on the bandwagon to, as much as she can, try and, try and make Louise's name a black name. But it's just insane. Why would a female councillor be working to try and make it so that any man who identifies as a woman can enter female spaces where little girls, mums and grandmums are undressing and showering at a pool? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
And as what's happening in Scotland shows. Yeah. Sorry, Isla.
Yeah, I'll just elaborate a bit here. Last night on the council agenda, which has been put out for next Monday, Louise will be having her motion debated. But a counter motion has been put in by TRA councillors Dr. Zelinda Sherlock and Ryan Posselt. And the counter motion is basically a witch hunt. It's cranking up what I call the rack of the Inquisition for Louise Elliott, getting ready to put her through re-education under a policy of diversity and inclusion training, that all councillors will have to go to diversity inclusion training, that they must comply with the Act, that blah-de-blah-de-blah. They've actually taken screenshots of her Facebook page and used them in their motion as evidence. And they have also threatened code of conduct inquiry, not naming her particularly, but that this potentially could happen to her, or there could be a local government investigation into her. I believe that Louise is the sort of person who is very determined in her position on what is inclusive and fair culturally to people from both Muslim, Orthodox, Jewish backgrounds, and to people who believe in science, not religion as the basis for inclusive trauma-informed policy in relation to single-sex spaces. So good on Louise. She's doing an amazing job, and we're so glad that she is fighting the good fight with us.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because as we know that there, you know, the council indoctrination programs, you know, these LGBTQ plus orgs are traveling around and, you know, basically doing deals with councils to impose these inclusion policies on them, but they're not honest. You know, they're telling workplaces that they don't have to have sex-specific toilets and things like that. But there's nowhere in the law that says that current agreements have to change. That, you know, if you've got a male toilet and a female toilet, there's no legislation that insists that you must change that. So these vested interests are coming into people's workplaces and lying to them.
Yes, I think the thing about Louise's motion, to be very, very clear, she's not saying that the law needs to be repealed. She's not suggesting the law needs to be broken as it currently stands. Or she's saying that in terms of future planning and for development of facilities and use of facilities, they need to consider the complexities of this issue and provide options. There will still not be a compulsion upon, you know, trans-identified males flashing their willies around in front of little girls' faces 2 feet away from them, or women. And of course, this of course would be my question to councillors if I was allowed to ask a question on Monday, which I'm not, because you're not allowed to ask questions when motions are being debated in council at Hobart City Council for some reason. Other councils can. But that would be the question I would be asking councillors if they had a little girl. How would they feel about her having no choice but being exposed to male genitalia by law in change rooms? They won't answer that, of course. They'll just say I'm a bigoted TERF.
It's yeah, I told a story a couple of weeks ago about how I visited a small country town, and here in Victoria, all toilets and change rooms have been replaced with unisex. There's no consultation process. If you just get a new public, you know, change facility at a sporting pavilion, or if you your local town gets new public toilets, they give you unisex toilets. And I went to a town in the middle of nowhere, and I noticed they had brand new toilets, and they were male, female, and unisex. And I said to the lady in the post office, I said, "Oh, you've got new toilets here." I said, "I thought the Labor government insisted that all toilets were unisex." And she said, "Oh, they did. We just changed the signs. So now they've got male, female, and unisex." So, you know, people aren't buying it. They don't want this. Nobody wants to share a toilet or change room particularly.
One important thing I should add, that when Lynn was saying that there were men at our protests too, one of them is a former federal Labor politician, Harry Quick, a real man of the people. He was a fantastic representative for Tasmania, really grassroots fellow, teacher again. And the other person was our stalwart supporter and free speech advocate, former Alderman Jeff Briscoe, also a teacher. So 2 teachers attended that protest, and Harry Quick is absolutely behind us on this issue. He was telling me that he knows somebody in England a woman who's got a child, and when she takes her to the pool, she has to take her husband because she feels unsafe in a unisex change room. So, Angela, are you actually saying there are unisex change rooms throughout Victoria, or just toilets?
Yeah, in public sporting facilities. Yes.
Speechless.
That there's unisex change rooms in public sporting facilities.
So what happens is when it's younger kids, they take it in turns.
It's outrageous.
There was no change to the legislation. Sorry?
When it's adults, they don't take it in turns?
I have no idea. Because there was, if the legislation was changed that said that all toilets need to be unisex now, nobody knew about it. Nobody. Because I only heard about it because I went to our local council and complained that there were no male and female toilets in a public park. This is probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And they said, oh, it's a directive of the state government.
Okay. So the protest in Launceston, Lynn, how did that go? I wasn't able to attend.
Yeah, so actually, would you just like to mention the media release that was put out beforehand, Isla?
Yes, we did. We have a new woman working with us in Tasmania, Simone, and she's a representative of Simone Dawson, is a spokesperson for Women's Action Alliance Tasmania.
Excellent.
And we're absolutely over the moon that we've got another voice representing children's and women's rights on this campaign. We did a coalition media release basically saying that drag queen story time was completely inappropriate, that we wrote to all government ministers asking them to intervene and stop this from going ahead. We haven't had any replies from government ministers, and we had absolutely zero contact from any media about our media release. So Lynn, Jessica Hoyle and I did a short protest with Simone in Launceston a week ago. Outside the library, we had a banner, and I was able to contact somebody who alerted the Examiner journalist to come to our protest. She did. She left a council meeting to come to speak to us. She did an extensive interview, which Simone actually recorded. So we've actually got a recording of part of the interview the Examiner journalist did, and of course didn't cover the story. By this week, Jessica Hoyle had organised the protest through LGB Tasmania, and she'd, got a few people to come along. And Lynn then went over. We didn't put out another media release because Jessica had already put it on Facebook that we were having the protest. Equality Tasmania, of course, got wind of the fact that we were having a protest and organised a counter-protest. If they hadn't already organised a welcoming for it, because they knew that we would be doing something. I should mention, when we did our first action at the library last week, we went upstairs to administration to actually seek a meeting with the managing director of the library, Gary Cooper. He declined to meet with us. 3 of us had written to him actually more women had written to him complaining about the event and also seeking a meeting with him. And he again refused to meet with us. Over to you, Lynn.
Right, yeah. So it was just a short protest that went from about 9:30 till 10:30, say 11. It was sort of petering out. I arrived at about 9, and already there were quite a few, let's just say, pro-drag queen supporters, I'll call them that, who were there. And we were just sort of, wandering around. I had a banner, which I'll read out to you what I had on the banner, because interestingly, when I first stood there and put it up, it was quite large. Some of the people who were on, let's just say, the pro-drag queen side were reading it, and I could actually see them going, And I had 2 walk past me on their way to get a coffee, because there was a little coffee van further up in the square, who actually said to me, oh, that's an interesting banner, like as if they actually were agreeing with it. So, so I'll read it out to you. I had written, Little Red Riding Hood teaches children to trust their instincts and to protect their boundaries. Drag Queen Story Time, where grown men dressed as women read stories to young children that contain ideals of gender identity ideology, do the opposite. Oh, what big teeth you have, Grandma. There's no pride. There's no pride in grooming young children. So that was written on the banner. And and that was quite early on, that what I just described there as actually some of the people from the pro side, actually, I think, making them think about maybe there is a little bit more to this issue than that we just hate them all, which of course is not the case. You know, this is about safeguarding children.
And you realise this particular drag queen on his Facebook talks about masturbation and urine fetishes. Like, I saw him, you know, like I saw these comments with my own eyes. This actual drag queen for this event at Hobart Library talks about masturbation and urine.
Right.
So we're a bunch of fuddy-duddies who just don't like men wearing dresses. We don't like the caricature, but, you know, this is a person who has shown his deviance.
Yeah.
Well, the other way of looking at it from their point of view is it's normalising masturbation and urine fetishes, as
that
former
Rod
said on the Mercury Facebook page. I don't know what's wrong with sexual fetishes.
Yeah. Well, going along with that theme, Angela, I'm just going to read out to you what the name of the drag queen who was going to read the stories to the kids at this particular event in Launceston is called Pussy Poppins. Right? Now, if you do a search on Google, which, let's be honest, any kid can do, we found this. Pussy Poppin, without the S, according to the Urban Dictionary, so Pussy Poppin has been made popular by several porn movies and means, quote, when a woman stands on her head / or hands with her legs spread, balancing as she shakes her ass front to back. That's what Pussy Poppin means. This is the name of the drag queen that was reading to 2 to 5 year olds.
Charming.
So anyway, as you can see, we have reason to be upset about safeguarding, because even if a 2 to 5 year old isn't going to jump on, you know, mum's mobile phone and do a Google search, surely an older child in the family could easily do that and voila, come up with porn sites. So this is a massive safeguarding issue.
I mean, what sort of general manager of a library, what sort of man would allow this to happen? What's his background?
Well, according to his Facebook page, let me just see. I have got it written down here. He has written, I won't be quoting, but whatever, you know what I mean? It's this is what he said, that he's a pansexual who is politically motivated with a dash of vulgarity, creativity, and lust. So he supported the drag queen event, and I'm assuming helped get it up and running. Along with Equality Tasmania and the Northwest Pride Group, they're called. So they were the ones who organised the event. So this is the background to it. We had a number of people turn up, let's just say, to protest the event. And it was actually quite a broad, group. So we had, for example, Keep Gender Identity Out of Schools, myself. We had, obviously, the protest was put on by Jess Hoyle, so LGB Tasmania. We also had the Women's Action Alliance. We had, Let Women Speak Tasmania, all secular groups who were there. We also had a older woman from the Catholic I think it's the Catholic Christian League or some name like that, 70-year-old grandmother who, understands safeguarding. We had a number of other Christians who were there. We also had local business owners who turned up, and just people in general who were there because they just couldn't believe that the event was actually being held in a public library. None of those people were interviewed for the Examiner article that went into the paper that night, and then again this today that's on the front page. The only people, well, in fact, I was interviewed, but none of what I said at all went into the final published piece. The only person who had a small amount published was Jessica, and then the rest was just basically a hit job on all those people there who were there to make sure that our voices were heard about the safeguarding of children. And the rest, we were all just hateful bigots, according to the Examiner. It's outrageous, really.
What media turned up, Lynn?
Okay, so there were two people from the Examiner. There was well, I'd call her a girl because she's younger than me, but she's probably in her early 20s, called Alison, who actually the final article was published under. And then there was a guy with her called Rod. Now, Rod, he was asked a direct question as to whether he agreed that adult men or adult males should be allowed to change in female changing rooms with little girls, mums and grandmothers. And, did he think that that was okay? And his response was, oh, that's not happening in Tasmania. So he didn't actually answer the question. He deflected by just trying to pretend that it's not happening. How can it not be happening when we have the councillor at the Hobart City Council trying to push a motion to allow it to happen? Like, really? What's going on here? The media don't seem to be even reporting on the people who are wanting it to happen. And, it just doesn't make any sense. Also, apart from those two journalists who quickly interviewed, as I said myself, none of which got into the article, and Jessica, they went over and spent the rest of the time mingling with the pro-drag queen crowd. Then later on, there were 3 ABC reporters turn up who also spent all of their time mingling with the pro-drag queen crowd. I went up to them and said, could you interview me, please? Because we want to, get across some of the issues that we have. And the response was, oh, we're only here to observe. We're not here to report. Really? Is the public purse paying for ABC reporters to attend events to observe and not report? I was astonished. I couldn't believe it. And in fact, one of the ABC reporters is in the background in the photo that's on the front page of the Examiner today. So, sure. Not doing his job, just standing there observing.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly observing. So that's quite amazing in and of itself. As well as that, while we were, mingling with all the people who were there, I obviously hadn't met most of the people who were actually there to support, our protest. So I was chatting to most of them, and they all had really interesting stories, stories which the media could have, got and could have actually put as the other side of the issue, but no, none of those people were interviewed. So as an example, there was a father there that I chatted to who was there because his daughter, who was in her late 20s, he said, had been recently taken in by the trans movement, and she had now had her breasts removed and was on testosterone, and he was devastated. He said, I always knew that she was a lesbian, and but now this is what's happened, so he was there saying, that this movement, those people over there on that side are the same people who are pushing these policies. They're the same people. There was a social worker that I spoke to. He said that he was astonished because there were other social workers. Sorry. There were other social workers at the event, but they were on the pro drag queen side of the.
Oh, Lynn, where have you gone? Where's she gone, Isla?
I don't know. We should come back in a second.
Hopefully. Do you know much more about what Lynn was talking about?
Yeah, pretty well. I think a summary of the event is basically that the media were there to be seen, to be giving public support to the drag story time. Also present at the protests were 4 police, also mingling with the gender lobby. Yeah. So once again, shocking report in the on the front page of the Examiner today in some regards, but very good for us. In fact, it's backfired on the Examiner because we're getting time, we're getting airtime. So as much as the gender lobby try to keep us out of the media, this has been very successful for raising the issues. And the majority of the Tasmanians think that it is grooming to give drag queens to children, and they will be alerted that this is happening and that there is organised opposition. And while the Examiner article may have tried to focus on one individual who just joined the protest out of the blue and was provoked and said some things that other people at the protest would not have said, I think that the article, like the editorial in The Advocate, basically shows the intent of both editors of these papers. By the way, they belong to Australian Community Media. These papers are Australian Community Media, and I think they own a lot of rural newspapers, regional newspapers in Australia, possibly radio stations. And I wouldn't be in the least surprised that they're actually signed up to ACON.
Yeah.
The response from the editor at The Advocate in his letters to us, he said that his editorial was the view of the masthead. So wow. I suspect they are bought out by Rainbow Tick or ACON.
Wow.
Yeah. There's just another little point I wanted to make, talking about ABC. When we had the pool protest, an ABC camerawoman came along and did extensive filming of our pool protest. Not put to air. No, not put to air, and no interview, no nothing. And,
look who's back.
You back, Lynn?
Lynn's coming in.
While she's coming in, I'll just continue on once again on the ABC. I do love to have a go at the ABC. They need
so do I.
Louise Elliott was alerted to the fact that Rick Goddard, ABC TRA on the breakfast program, was doing an interview with acting Mayor Helen Burnett about Louise's motion.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. He hadn't rung Louise Elliott to do an interview with her about her motion. He rang his mate, Helen Burnett, to interview her. He did the interview, and Louise rang in on Talkback Line and blasted the hell out of him. And she did one. She just gave it to him. And he was sort of fumbling for words. This has been a long-standing list of complaints against Rick Goddard, one of which was upheld by the ABC internal ombudsman, and it was published. Actually, I put it on my page, and also Free Speech Alliance page, Facebook page, published the apology from Rick Goddard. So he consistently berates and is very negative and abusive about any gender critical points of view. But this one really was abominable. Yeah. Over to Lynn again if she's back.
Sorry about that. Somebody kept ringing in and they just wouldn't go away, and it just crashed my system.
That's all right.
Where did I get to? I was talking about a social worker, was I? Yeah, a social worker, who said that he could see that there were other social workers there, basically, who were pro-drag, and he was just astounded. He said, I cannot believe that they're doing this because it goes against all safeguarding, policies and protocols for young children. So
quite a lot of trans-identified men particularly are going into social work as a career choice because it fits in with that evangelical push the gender on the young ones. It's almost like a church, like a cult, and getting into social work is a way for them to infect through the public service and all of the youth health, youth networks, Indigenous networks and things like that. So social work's a very, very popular career for trans rights activists.
Wow, yeah, that's scary. I spoke to, I'm just trying to think now, I spoke to another woman who, she was there specifically because she said that she had been to places where her daughter, who's, I think she said she was about 13 or 14, was beginning to question why there were, men in dresses in women's toilets. And so she'd come for that reason, and also because obviously she was totally against, the drag queen story time, because she could see again that it's the same people pushing these ideas and policies and whatever, onto children and young people. So, people are making the connection. They weren't just there against the drag queen story time. They were actually there because they associate that it's the same people who are pushing other policies as well. That was what I was really interested in. And again, if the journalists had asked any of these people any of these questions, they probably would have found that out for themselves.
Wow.
So let me see, is there anything else that I need to mention? That's probably it, really. Just to say that I was actually there with another person who I've been, raging, who knows that I've been raging about this for about 3 years, who never really believed what I was telling them about the media. And they came away from that event going, oh my God, now I understand when you say that the media aren't reporting accurately, like both sides of this issue. Now I am talking about. And so that was good, actually, that person got to see it, while they were there.
And then read the front page of the Examiner the next day as proof of the pudding.
Yes.
Well, for a small state, you've had a lot of action.
Yeah, we have. And I think really now people are just starting to wake up, to what's happening. A lot of the media use the excuse that, we haven't had anything happen since these laws came into place. Well, yes, we probably have had some things happen and they haven't reported them, or people have reported them, but they haven't actually made it to the media. But the other thing is that, as we all know, the UK and the USA way further ahead on this culturally than we are in Australia. But the issue that we have here in Australia is that most of our states already have laws that are way more advanced in terms of extinguishing, the rights of women and children than those countries. And our culture is now catching up. Once our culture catches up to the laws that we have here, it's going to be bedlam.
It is. People are waking up, though. They're waking up, waking right up. Like some people that I thought were lost to the cult but were woke as woke are coming to me now and saying, I see it. And I think it's because of this saturation of everything, LGBTQ plus, like the trans flags outside all the public buildings, the trans flags in the doctor's office, the trans flags in all the health services, the trans flags in the psychologist's offices. Everywhere you go, there are progress flags and trans flags. And today we even saw an asexual flag. And people are, realizing that this is not a marginalized group of people. And this is also not the LGB. And people are just starting to join the dots because the rainbow wasn't everywhere. They weren't raising the rainbow.
I forgot to mention, probably about halfway through the event, there might have been some come earlier, and then maybe by about halfway through, there were actually, I think, 4 or 5 police were at the event, which was great because if there'd been any, altercations or anything, it's good for everyone to be safe. But here's the thing, interestingly, the police all stood over pro drag queen side of the event, chatted away, and one was even seen to be having selfies.
Lovely.
Selfies with some of the people on the the pro drag queen side. So what do we have? We have the police, we have the media, and we have at this point in time people within government all on that side pushing gender identity policies and laws, and we have a small people who are now waking up to it who are all called bigots and baddies. I really don't think you can call those people a victimised minority. They've got the whole of, the establishment behind them.
They have. And, they don't, obviously none of these agencies do safeguarding checks. I mean, even these organisations that are going into local government and indoctrinating them, one of the big proponents for that is paid money to go into these, councils and convince them to adopt all this stuff. If they'd done a background check on him, they'd realise that he has proven links to pedophiles. If they'd done a background check on this drag queen, they would have seen all the porn-related stuff. They're not doing even the most basic background checks. Yet if you or I went to propose, say, for example, a women's domestic violence resource, my God, we'd have to go through loops to prove that we were, experienced and responsible and working with children checks, even though there weren't any children because we're working with women. And we would have to jump through so many hoops, and yet they'll let any old creep come in and work with women and children. It's just insane.
Actually, just on, can I just say, and just on people waking up, did you see the article? You'll probably remember his name because I don't watch the show, but there was somebody who was in, the Married, something about getting married show? First.
Married at First Sight.
Yeah, did you see the article in the Daily Mail?
No, I don't watch it.
No, either do I. But there was a guy from that show who came out against drag queen story time. He actually questioned why it was happening in his area, and he got his team, or his management team, have told him that he's not welcome with them anymore. They're not going to be his managers. But he has doubled down on it and said, no, I'm not taking back what I said because I didn't say anything bad. All I did was question the event, why the public purse has been spent on it, and is it really right, for young children? So, and he's got gay friends and, works in that kind of environment where, like, of course, he's not a bigot. He's just saying, look, this is not appropriate.
When I was a kid, I had to go and sit on Zig and Zag's knee, and I resisted. Sorry?
I don't think we can make the allegation that the general manager didn't do the right checks at the library, because we have no evidence to make that allegation on. He said in his responses to our emails, the numerous emails he received, that they had undertaken the regular procedures in instances of having people in the library with children. So this may be the case in situations, but we can't make that allegation in Tasmania.
Well, he didn't check the Facebook page of the drag queen.
Well, we don't know what checks and balances they undertook, and we also don't know how the police do these things, because the Anti-Discrimination Act, what he does in his private life, if he's got no convictions, they may be very reluctant to discriminate against him because of any personal activities. They're perfectly normal, Angela.
But having said that, Isla, how does somebody with the name of Pussy Poppins, and I've already explained what that actually means, get a working with vulnerable people? What is it? It's a...
I think it's completely inappropriate to get a working with vulnerable people certificate with his background. But they don't understand the regulations and the law as it stands. And obviously, if they've allowed that to go through, it's another reason why we need a repeal of the gender identity law reforms.
Yeah. We're actually getting a bit low on time, sorry, and we've been talking for quite a while, which is great. But yeah, Isla, do you have something else for us? Apparently you are speaking at IWD this year.
Yes, I'll be speaking at IWD. I'm looking forward to catching up with a lot of women that I haven't met, and women I have met years ago. And I think it's going to be hopefully lots of fun. I'll be speaking on the challenges of free speech. I think it's the issue of freedom of speech and press freedom, media freedom, is, in my view, the core issue that we are confronted with.
Yeah.
What we've just been talking about now is all about press freedom and freedom of speech. And the Fourth Estate has lost its power to inform and impartially report on events as they happen and get both points of view. And of course, as we know, various media organisations have been politically and editorially captured. I won't be going into the philosophical issues about the difference between fair speech and free speech. That's not my intention in my discussion at IWD. But what I would like to talk about is why the Free Speech Alliance set up again in Australia. There used to be a Free Speech Alliance back in the 1990s, based primarily in Sydney, that Robert Pullen was involved in. He was a writer and journalist. Tony Katsigiannis, I liaised with both of them while I was working with Whistleblowers Australia at the time. Basically, they did a lot of work around political issues, whistleblowers, denying people entry into Australia because of their political views, blah, blah. But a small group of people got together in Hobart here back in January, and we decided there was very much a need to revamp a Free Speech Alliance. There had been another one that was up and running, which I think was more politically oriented. Free Speech Alliance Australia is beyond left and right. You can see it on our banner. I try to pull together a lot of the stories that are coming out internationally from Heterodox Academy. We have a lot of fascinating stuff about the achievements of Heterodox Academy getting into universities, particularly in the US. As many people will be aware, last year, I think, was the launch of the new Austin, Texas University, which was basically set up to be a university that, believed in rigorous thinking, critique, analysis, and debate. And the Free Speech Union in the UK, while I've been informed by one of our sisters that it's run by a fairly right-wing person, nevertheless, they've been doing a lot of good talks around the UK. A lot of writers have joined the Free Speech Union in the UK. So I'd like to steer clear of the right-left antagonism and labelling there, and just stick with the facts of what they're reporting. So I'm a lot of that stuff. A lot of the stuff is around gender identity.
Yeah. I wouldn't have believed that we had the issues with free speech that we had, 5-10 years ago. I wouldn't, the people on the far right used to go on about their free speech, and I used to go, oh, you've got to be kidding. And, it was this gender stuff that really undermined my belief that we had any kind of free speech whatsoever. That we can actually be not only lied to, but then denied the opportunity to reply. It's just insane.
Look, I think that it's more than just gender. And in my experience in the last 2 years, liaising with people around issues about fearless reporting and covering both sides of the argument with impartiality, it's not just gender identity, it's also Indigenous politics.
Yes.
Very fierce across Australia. The Indigenous politics issues in Tasmania have been very fraught in the last 2 years with the Crowther statue issue. And it's come to my attention a lot of the historical basis for the counter arguments and the factual basis for the counter arguments. And so, it's very concerning that we live in a time where people very focused on identity, no matter what form of identity it is, have this slogan of, we want to tell our truth, we want to truth telling. But I think what I've discovered is that really what we really should better be saying is truth seeking.
Yeah.
Because there's an absolutism about this concept of truth telling. And if we want the other side to listen, if we want journalists and the media to listen, or some people who are afraid to speak, then we've got to be generous enough to say, well, let's have the discussion, let's have the debate, let's have the generosity to say that we want to seek some truth here, not necessarily the truth. So I'm very interested in how this reflects on practice, activist practice. I won't use the word radical feminist practice specifically. I think I would like to reflect on activist practice, no matter what your political theoretical background is. So I will be talking about a couple of these case studies that we're going to be doing. But I think the free speech movement is vital in the UK, has been vital to get more support on board for gender critical people.
Yeah.
A magnificent asset to have that. And as happens in New Zealand, I don't get much of their information coming through my feed, but they've been doing terrific work in New Zealand for some time. Out in the US, there are groups too, but they're the ones I rely on. So we've got a very good resource with the Free Speech Alliance Facebook page. It keeps us up to date with book banning and unbook banning and, all these issues. And it is an umbrella. One of my very dear friends in the early 1990s in Hobart who introduced me to a lot of radical feminist literature, including Radically Speaking, wonderful, wonderful book. said to me, don't look at the donut, look at the hole. And the hole in my mind is freedom of speech press. And it's a lens with which, as an activist, you can work. And I'll be talking about that.
Fantastic. And tickets for IWD Brisbane in the first week of March have sold out. However, this year they're going to be live streaming the speakers on the IWD Facebook page and later on YouTube. So I urge everybody to watch it. They always have amazing speakers at that event. And follow IWD Brisbane on Facebook and on Twitter. They're fantastic. Wow. Yeah, that brings to Kelly J. She's touring. Most of the criticism directed at her are towards her views on free speech, and the fact that she will give a platform to women from all sides of politics when it comes to how gender identity has impacted on them. I tend to agree with her, which is controversial, but I think this may be one of the few moments where women can come together and fight this together. When Kelly J's tour, that she's building the momentum for women to join hands against this, basically. So yeah, I'm looking forward to her events next month. We're kind of out of time. Lynn, do you have anything else you want to bring attention to, or?
No, I think that'll be enough. People have been listening for a while.
I like your rooster. And Isla, have you got anything else you'd like to promote or talk about?
No, I'd just like to say that when I had to pop out, I had to get the wallaby out of my garden. Somebody left the gate open. This is so. This is a story.
Yeah, I've got a goat headbutting my door in the background. I can hear a goat going bang, bang on the glass door trying to get through right as we speak. So if I'm a bit distracted, madness. But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your wonderful work in Tasmania too, let's see what happens in the next few weeks. Something, the tide seems to be turning.
Yes.
Let's all just get into it.
One final thing I'd like to say, I mentioned it online just yesterday. Tasmania is a very small state. I believe that we've got a very good chance of repealing these laws here. A much better chance than repealing them in the bigger states, bigger population states. We've got really good social networks here, a small community, really conservative, traditional community, but a community also that has a lot of working class people in it who know when bullshit's bullshit. I think we can around here, and it is starting to happen big time.
Yay. Good luck. Fantastic. So if you're on this channel, I need a new microphone. So if you'd like to contribute $3 a month to the Terf Talk Patreon, that would be fantastic. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel to support Australian content. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week. See you, everybody. Bye.